everybody, and welcome. I'm Clay Banks, and this is the Performance Zone, PZTV, coming to you live through Facebook or anywhere else you might be catching this. This is the interview show where I help you enter the minds and the hearts of industry professionals from all aspects of the business and the art of the craft. And we do it right here at Claybank Studio International, which this show is being brought to you by claybankstudio.com and Claybank Studio International, your premier acting resource for online and on-camera acting training. Now, each episode I come in with a new guest, and today I have a special guest, a gentleman I've known back to the 90s. And we're here with Mr. KevinEWest. Kevin, welcome.
Thanks, man.
Yeah,
Pleasure.
buddy. Good to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
Man, getting you in here has been like crazy.
It's a wrinkle now and again.
Yeah, we had to bump you a couple of times, but for good reasons.
Yes, I got to get on a plane tomorrow.
Yeah, so here, I got to tell the story. For those of you that don't know, Kevin was penned in, I believe, last week. He was penned in, and well, I think you were penned in twice, but you were penned in last week, and Kevin was going to come on and talk about getting work in television. But then you got an audition, and we had to bump you.
Yes.
And he got bumped because of the audition. Then we were going to bring him in again, but then he got bumped because
I am shooting it.
he booked it. He booked a guestie on Hawaii Five-0, right?
Yes, sir.
Tell us about it.
I am heading.
Fresh.
It's my standard Kevin E. episodic job of moving expositional. I get to play a major general because clearly I am old enough now that I look like I actually know things.
You're up
I suppose.
there. You're
but
doing the generals.
I'm doing the major general.
The
major general.
Right,
yes,
awesome.
absolutely.
Now we're going to talk about a lot of really cool things here. Kevin is an industry pro with a capital P. This guy is in and out of all aspects of the craft. It's like, what are we going to talk about? We need a whole special for you. But before we do, let's do this, because it was so cool that you were coming in to talk about getting work in television, and you booked a television show.
True.
Tell us about your process.
Well, Clay, probably from a business standpoint and also a craft standpoint, which is a lot of what I like to discuss, that I discovered early into being Los Angeles, was that I think one of the biggest deterrents that we don't get down, that we don't spend more time on, is actually what the audition non-craft part of an audition is.
The non-craft.
Non-craft part. Because I have been an advocate, I think it was someplace in like 94 or 95 during the Actors Network when I first came up with the topical discussion audition scenarios and then callback scenarios. Now, back then, we more often auditioned with just the humans in the room. It was the casting director and it might be a director, but there was always a couple of producers in the room. Now, obviously, most all of the auditions are put on camera, but the environment of the room, I happen to feel hugely about in terms of you being able to not have that affect your craft when you walk into the audition room. And it does. It affects a lot of people. And it's a hard thing to practice for, but I do believe it's one of the big things that you have to get down quickly, the ability to walk into a room, assess the room for yourself, even though they're going to tell you where they want you to stand or sit, but be able to process that before you start your craft process. I believe that's a huge left brain factor to you doing as well as you want to do in that room. And it's something I focused on 27, 28 years ago, and really made sure that I got good at that process. And we're talking 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 seconds from the time you clear the door till the time you actually have to start, or maybe it's 15, maybe. But that process for me, again, aside from whatever your technique is and whatever you're trying to do to work and do a great job, I just believe the environment of audition rooms, especially as much as the industry is sort of diverse and mixed with all kinds of different people casting projects, and the professionalism, amateurism, I think that's a huge part of what my process is to making sure that I go in and do a good job, because it was the 6th time that I'd read for the show.
Okay, let's break this down a little, only because it is so fresh, and a large part of our audience is working actors or coming about actors. So because this has just happened, you're on a plane tomorrow to Hawaii, is that
Yes,
right?
I'm on a plane tomorrow. Yes,
You're on a plane tomorrow to Hawaii to go shoot, and how many days do they have you booked?
3.
3? And then turn around and back, and there's
Yeah,
a gig.
come back home. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, because it's so fresh and it just happened, and it actually interrupted our schedule, which was cool.
I'm so sorry.
No, it wasn't, because it worked out great. Had a wonderful artist come in, Krista Meadows from Las Vegas. The timing actually worked out great. And Joey, who originally was your first bump, he wasn't going to be available today on the day we were going to shoot him. So it all worked out. It all worked out brilliantly.
Sexy dominoes, as I like to call them.
It's that serendipitous nature of things that happen sometimes. But because it's so fresh for you, let's talk about it. Just take us through. You get the call. It wasn't a self-tape. It was directly in the room, correct?
Correct.
And just some insights, Kevin. How'd you book this Hawaii 5-0?
The craft part of it? I mean, my process to it? Yeah. Well, Kevin, a long time ago, studied with a man named David LeGrant, and David was a pseudo method-based guy, old school New York guy, but he didn't do his class all the way like that. And what I slowly invented for myself was what I call Kevin's 10 questions. And those 10 questions are how I break down material.
Great.
And because I am from a simplistic standpoint, I used to get from people that I was really directable. And I wasn't sure why or how, but I finally figured out it was because I was very quick at being able to assess what I thought the difference was between the script and what the audition should be. And that tends to be based for me on environment, time, and of course, relationship. And I don't think that we spend enough time as actors in life. I mean, look where we're sitting. We're sitting in a studio. Now, Clay, you and I could have this conversation, and in ways we have. We've had this conversation at the Actors Network, or we've had conversations at a coffee place. But the fact that we're sitting in two chairs, even if cameras weren't on, is going to change this conversation. And so I have a real particular process that I go through with material, whether it's a pilot, whether it's 3 pages or 7 pages, where I get really specific right off the bat about what time of day it is, where I am, whether it's public or private, whether it's a private place that can become public, like walking
for the interview or the scene that you're
for the scene.
Okay, so take us through this one. The general.
Well, and again, as it is with any office that you get to go into, if it's the first time, that's part of the problem. The first time I read for Criminal Minds, I booked it, but I had never walked into this room. So you have all this work that you do. It doesn't matter to me what your technique is, but you have all this work, and then all of a sudden a casting director brings you into a room and you're walking into like someone's house for the first time. And your eyes have to immediately assess, oh, okay, well, there she is, and there's the camera, oh, it's over there, and then there's 2 chairs on either side, but which one are they going to sit in, and who's going to read with, and all this stuff that goes through your mind, and then all of a sudden they go, okay, go.
Right.
And where's your work? And what we do as actors is we automatically just jump into, well, I got to get the words right. And that's what happens to most people's auditions, in my opinion.
Right.
And so you may be really good at making that switch to get the words right, but how connected are? How much can they use your technique that you teach them if they're busy going, okay, the camera's in, and then she just, and especially if they have the first line and they just start.
They're in control.
And so that's one of my big processes is I walk into a room really slow. I will hold back from them. Now, I know this particular office. I know Jennifer Cooper's office. I know the setup, and it's never going to change currently while they're in that space. But the first time I was there, I didn't know it.
Right.
So that's one of my big things, and it's the same for commercial auditions. It's the same for any audition is you're walking into someone's casting studio and you don't know exactly. So just slow down. That's in the vein of this show of trying to give information that's going to help your audience. Don't rush in the room. Be 4 or 5 steps behind the person bringing you in the room and take a second and figure out.
Be in control of yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And don't let the process of you figuring that out, let it be more by you figure it out naturally by how slow you walk, not by how quickly you have to get your mind going to catch up to it. Because if your mind's going fast to catch up to it, yes, sometimes, Clay, the audition will help it, maybe. But in general, I usually feel that it throws actors off a great deal.
Okay, so that's excellent. Just take your time, be in that
to
compression.
get settled. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So you're in there. How many pages did you have for this particular?
4.
4, and were you off book?
I usually tend, just a philosophy I've had for 20-some years, I work to be close to off book, but it really does depend on the role. If there are times when I don't feel that being completely off, helps, especially when the character is supposed to be reading something or pondering something. Sometimes that's a useful way to not be off book. But for myself personally, because I happen to memorize well, and I know not everybody does, if I can, I tend to, but I'm still careful. Like that's why the pages sometimes don't matter. I've had more work in 3 pages sometimes than I have had in 8 pages. It just depends on what the sides are. So I really look at the emotional life of the character, and the decisions I'm going to make as to exactly how much I'm going to choose to have down from memory. But you know, if you don't have it down, this again, it's a technical thing. It's like actors relax their arm. They relax. I mean, you can't keep doing this if you're reading. This is one of the first things that I was taught was, and I like to have the sides with me because I don't want them to think I have it memorized. I may have it memorized, but I want you to believe that I don't. So, but you have to keep them up here. It's, again, this is a big thing about auditions now because they're all on camera. Even if you go to someone's office, they're on camera. It's like, you know, Clay, they're never going to tell you, you have a camera right there that's on me. If I do this a lot during the audition, they will never tell you why they aren't going to hire you. They just aren't going to hire you because they can't afford to have you do this in a close-up. Right. You'll go in and out of the frame, or like this, in and out of focus, depending on whether it's a 20 or a 40, whatever the lens is. And so those things, and they cut slack for people that are younger, maybe sometimes, sure. But man, television is done in 8 days, and they don't have an extra 2 to make it up. You know, we're not doing a film someplace on the Mosquito Coast. Yeah, right. So the stillness, because I don't know about you, but I'm one of the guys that can do this all day long. You hand me a piece of material and ask me to sit down and do it all day. Yeah. So those are some of the, and those are a lot of things that a lot of teachers, we spend a lot of time on craft. And I'm 1,000% behind it. But there are mechanisms that make you a better actor in the room in the film and television world. I used to call it asexual reproduction, and I didn't mean it as a bad way, because the person you're reading with is maybe so-so, they're not trying to give you a whole lot, you don't know what you're going to get. It's like, it's my job to come in, settle, calm, 1,000,000,000% out of me regardless of what you do. That's a reality of film and television auditioning. Okay, so you read through the material once with a reader, just a flat reader? Were they giving you anything? No, I mean, you know, the gals in her office are solid. Okay, great. They're solid. They give you a redirect? Nope. So it was one shot, boom, and out. You know, I can tell you right now, I played an Australian and lost, and beat out about 13, 14 Australians to play an Australian. That was about 8, 9 pages. It was a huge guest star and lost. It was the #1 television show in America at the time. One take. Nice. One take. Okay. And that was 15 years ago. Let's talk about your memorization, because I know that's a big dynamic for actors. It's like memorizing, because I work with it all the time. What do you do? This is going to unfortunately upset you in this show. One of those minds that just does it, right? Yeah, that is correct. Is that right? Yeah. I didn't know this until I'd been an actor for a while. Silly me, I just figured, well, I'm able to memorize this stuff. Isn't everybody like that? And then I had a few people that I met and talked with. But I will give you one key thing. And this is a principle of life. This is not a principle of acting. My old acting coach, same guy, David LeGrant, rest his soul, he made us, when we did scenes from plays, old school plays, all the stuff he did, you had to sit down and write out the scene by hand with no punctuation. Because you're doing this scene. You're not doing the way the writer wanted the first person to do it on Broadway way back in the day. Yeah. And I will certainly say to you, matter of fact, I have to do a speech tomorrow morning before I get on the plane to go to Hawaii for something else. And I'm doing this speech, even though I've spoken 1,600 times in my life, I have to do this speech tomorrow for the first time. And it's 40 minutes straight, no note cards. And so I implore the same principle I do as an actor, is I write stuff down. I rewrite scenes. And by writing it down helps you. They have studies on that. It will actually help you learn material, is to write it out. Uses another part of your brain. Yep. Yeah. That's why when you even if you're taking notes and you don't even review the notes, you're activating another part of your brain. That is correct. And so I'm a big advocate of that. Awesome. Then that helps right there. So what we're hearing so far is that you want to be patient and compressed and in control when you walk in that room, control the whole thing regardless of what you're getting back, and make sure you write your material down and that you're solid. And let me make sure I add this, because I referenced that maybe the person reading with you has the first line. But if they do, just before you think they might start, just say to them, if you could just raise your hand before you're going to start, that'd be great.
Oh, that's cool.
Because if they're sitting there, one side of the camera, left or right,
sure.
you know, and I don't want them to just start talking. I just, you know, I want them to. And then the same thing, if they're going to start on me, I always say to them, let me know when you're ready, so just point at me, and I'll start. But when either one of those, when the one happens where I start, it's like that, just because they pointed, I don't have to jump right on top of them.
Right.
Again, you can't wait 17 years, but we tend to be a bit anxious in auditions, and a lot of times that doesn't work out well for us.
Yeah, I like to say, just because the director says action doesn't mean you have to say anything.
Correct.
Have your behavior.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, well, take us to the fun part. So you leave the room, you get on with your life, and then you get the call.
Yeah. And I did not think so.
Why not?
I've been doing this a long time. I'm very particular about this. Kind of goes to some of what I discuss when I said this to you earlier about the decision. I've spent a lot of time on myself understanding us being a product for sale.
Right.
And with all due respect, because I don't have gray hair and because I may be the age I am, and you know my age, I'm old enough to play the part. But I commonly don't get hired to play chiefs and generals, and because I don't have salt and pepper hair.
Right.
Or I have hair. And so it was the 6th time I read for the show, and I mean, 4 of those were top of shows and 2 of them were one days, and I mean, I killed some auditions for them. Didn't get hired.
But would you say, Kevin, because I tell actors that you're not just going to go into these offices and just book. You got to get in there, build a reputation. They've got to learn you. You got to be in there 6 to 8 times before you're going to get a yes, generally.
Sometimes, I mean, that's a new phenomenon in the last 10 years. It certainly wasn't that way when we first met. I mean, if I didn't book a show within 2 times of reading, I thought I would never get it. Yeah.
Right.
Back in the day. And again, Criminal Minds. First time, it was 2-episode arc, and I walked in the room, and the director later told me that as soon as I walked in and said 2 lines, they knew.
Right.
Whereas my friend Mark Gant, who I know you know, is a terrific actor and a good-looking guy, he was there that day for a different part, and it was the 13th time he was reading for a show. And it just didn't used to happen, but it started happening more and more about 2004, 2005. I had to read for Castle 6 times and Bones 6 times, and this would have been the first one that would have gone past 6, but fortunately I booked it. So.
Yeah, and it's just the consistency of just doing the work, and you get your piece of the pie.
Yes, and unfortunately you have to be good. I mean, they're not running out of us anytime soon, but they're also, for the most part, they're not running out of. They have plenty of types in Los Angeles, so you have to do a good job every time. And while it's unfair to a degree, at the same time, it is what it is. I had a casting director years ago, way back in 1990, 91, say to me, what we ask of you guys isn't fair. He said, but unfortunately, if I'm seeing 50 people, I only need 1. And 2 or 3 of the people that come in are going to be able to do it, unfair or not. Mm-hmm. And that's part of my business thing of like, yeah, that's just life, man.
Yeah, I'll tell you a quick anecdote. Back when I was working a lot, there was a fella out there. I don't know if you know him or not, Michael Cutt. Michael Cutt was huge in the 80s.
A lot of credits.
And the 90s. The guy was like, he played those roles because he was that guy.
Yep.
He worked all the time.
All the time.
And Mike was older than I was, so I rarely auditioned with him. But there was this spot, they were looking at everybody. It was a big national pharmaceutical Class A network national.
Big money.
Big money spot. And they were looking at everybody.
Big money spot.
And so Mike and I are in the room together, and it's like, Mike, we'd done comedy together and everything. And I said, hey, look at us. It must be. He's like, hey, looking at everybody, because what are we doing in the room together? And it's like, 15 years between the two of us, 10, 15, something like that. And anyway, I got pretty crazy observation skills, and I looked and I said, oh, Mike, by the way, your watch needs a new battery. I see the second hand stop. He goes, oh no, that doesn't work. I said, why are you wearing a watch that doesn't work? He goes, it's a prop. I said, what's that all about? He goes, I know when I walk into a commercial audition, I have to have everything covered. And a man wears a watch, whether he does or he doesn't, so the watch goes on for every audition. I mean, this guy had it down to a science. Mm-hmm. You know, you're wearing a belt with the loops, it better have a belt in it. The buttons on the things that aren't buttoned, he goes, they better be buttoned. I mean, just all these details, because it comes down to you and another person or three, and they got to do a process of elimination. And that was his mentality about auditioning.
And yes, and the time factor has continued to go down, and they do want to spend less time having to worry. That's one of the hard parts about this business. There's no applause. There's no ovation. They literally want you to show up, be fabulous, get out of our way.
Exactly.
And so someone who looks like, again, maybe past the teens and maybe early 20s, who looks like they understand that we are basically making cars on an assembly line in a way, and a lot of guerrilla filmmaking and all those things have occurred. Someone who looks like they're prepared to walk in, boom, boom, out. It's subconscious. They won't ever say anything to you about it, but it can resonate for sure with certain productions. Absolutely.
They want the solution, not the problem.
Yep.
Yeah. Go in and deliver the baby, not the labor pains, right?
Yep. It needs you to show up, and I mean, I only have the time I have in Hawaii. They don't have extra time for me, that's for sure.
So now you're off to Hawaii.
Yes.
Nice.
I am. I don't get to go surfing, but I at least
They flying you first?
Have to.
Yeah.
Come
on,
5
baby.
hours, man.
It's always fun, isn't it?
It's a good time.
So, Kevin, you know, one of the reasons why I was excited about having you on the show is just, I mean, you know, you are one of these guys. You're like, to me, you remind me, you're just like one of these, like, Hollywood actor, like, bulldog, solid core dudes. And, you know, and you've done so much stuff. You've written books. I mean, you did a 2-hour audio series on getting the job.
Yeah, that's Technique. I did it with one of my former best friends who's passed, Carolyn Berry, who was one of the top commercial instructors in Los Angeles.
Many times.
Yeah, and so that's her, what she used to call her blue sheet, which was really printed on a piece of paper, really similar to the color of your shirt.
Right.
So the technique she puts on there is outstanding, will always be. Ironically, my 10 questions, my technique of how I break down a script, is on that. So that's more of the artistic side of things, craft side of things. And then my book is on the business side of the show.
Now this is a little bit more, this is your acting book, correct?
Right, yeah, that's my business book. 7
Deadly Sins
of The Actor Overcomes.
Wow, okay, so let's...
It takes the 7 sins and puts an actor word in front of them.
Let's talk about this, the 7 deadly sins the actor overcomes. So how do you want to jump into that?
Well, I mean, it took me a long time. I started to write the first book I was going to write probably back in 1992 or 1993. Right. It's the first time I copyrighted something towards that. And then I'd started the Actors Network in 91, and by 95, it started to sort of blow up, and then I started having more topics to discuss. And like you understand, the next thing I knew, 10 years had gone by. And at this point in the Actors Network history, I had close to 125 topics in my head, and I thought about doing a 5-book series. And some other things occurred, and another 8 years went by, and by the time I got to that point, 2 things happened. 1, I'd lost interest in writing that much material, and 2, our lives had changed because of technology, and I didn't feel particularly strongly about doing that. So I sat down and I was like, okay, at this point, how would you really do this? And I kept looking for a platform and a way to express 65 or 70 of those 125, but in a different way. And one day it just hit me because something happened. Maybe I was watching the movie 7 again, or who knows. But I realized that lust and gluttony and greed and wrath and pride and envy and sloth, all of those.
So the 7 deadly sins are the same 7 deadly sins.
100%.
And you just
actor lust,
wrap it around.
Actor greed, actor sloth, actor pride, actor envy.
There you go.
But they're all the business techniques that I invented over the years. I mean, a lot of people today go online, they see a lot of stuff. They don't realize that the guy who pioneered a lot of that stuff is sitting in this chair. 91, 92, 93, 94. People talk about target lists all the time. That wasn't discussed until it became part of the Actors Network. So I take the 7 sins, and I have 5 traps in each sin, and I have 5 solutions. But they're all the techniques, and the traps are based on the fact that we're human. The 7 deadly sins are based on a human being. Actors are human beings. So The nature, I mean, you know, we say actors are lazy. Well, isn't that being a sloth? Fits right in. We're always jealous of somebody doing something that we're not. Isn't that actor envy? And of course, what people don't recognize or realize sometimes is the 7 sins. What's the sin of all 7 that is actually based on all of them that is considered the worst by the creator of them? Pride. And so I took all of those, I mean, actor lust, and I break them down, but that's one of the reasons why, as I mentioned, like the solution to things. I wanted to set up the difficulty of some of what we face as an actor, but I also wanted to provide a positive, even within, quote unquote, something that is a sin. That's why I said, you know, the decision is a solution, one of the solutions to actor lust. That's what it's for. That's part of what we face is no one ever told us to sit down and make the decision to fully understand that you are a human being who's now simply a product for sale. And it's not emotional, and it's not personal, and you are who you are, and it is what it is. And if you can't process that for yourself and eventually understand that, yes, you may be terrific, you may have done a great job, but they hired a 6'4" black guy. Well, I'm not a 6'4" black guy. And a 6'4" black guy can play that part just as well as I played it. I mean, I went up for a Disney pilot years ago, Clay. This is when this first started happening for me. And I had a friend who was on the inside of Disney. And he goes, dude, you were so close. He said it was like down to like 2 of you, but they went Asian female.
Okay. What you going to do with that one?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's like, so I was thinking about getting a poodle, and I decided to go with Kita. Like, how's that happen? Like, I said, how does that? I was on the phone. I remember, you know, I was on payphone. I was calling on payphone. I was like, how does Asian female make me close? And that's when I really started to get down with it, being a sensitive Pisces, with the fact that, yeah, this physical shell is what it is. It's this Coke can or that Pepsi can or this something or other sitting on a shelf versus everything else. Some days they just pick something else. And the more you can understand that and make the decision versus being in your hometown or just doing stage where you have a lot more creative ability to play a 70-year-old or a 17-year-old,
Sure.
but not in film and television commercials. We're products for sale. So that's a lot of, the book became similar to what I'd planned on doing. It just became a little more psychological and a little more philosophical than I had originally planned 30 years ago. That's all.
Okay, so you talk about the 7 deadly sins, and the really kind of enlightening part of that is that you're because obviously they're famous
Yes,
across
they are.
humanity, are the solutions. You're offering solutions on how to tackle some of these issues.
Well, yeah, because I mean, well, pretty much, I mean, everything that I would ever have discussed at the Actors Network, pretty much everything that I ever brought up to anyone with regards to this was always predicated on, there you go, on the table of contents, was predicated on the things that we face that we tended to fail about. I mean, let's just take the premise right now. We got Pete here with glasses on. Pete could decide he's an actor.
Come on, Pete.
There's no entry barrier to being an actor. Anybody can wake up and they go,
Right.
well, I'm an actor.
I'm an actor.
Of course I am.
I'm an actor.
And so by definition, if you take something with no entry barrier that is completely subjective, that has 1,000 different techniques taught that you can do virtually anywhere in the world, there's a lot of latitude in all that mess. But then this is not being a lawyer or even being a specific type of doctor. It's much more fluid, much more amoeba-like than that. And so you have this collection of people who come from all over this country and all over the world, but Hollywood is Hollywood. And there's actually some real particular things about Hollywood when you start working and start getting up to certain places that they don't cut slack on. And that's hard for us as artists. So everything that I've always done has kind of been the premise on the fact that we're emotional. We get depressed, we're insecure, we have all of those are parts of the traps of the 7 deadly sins. The lust for the people who live near Hollywood and Highland every year when the Oscars are on. I mean, you're basically salivating, they're a half a mile away. That's hard for people. And that's part of what the 7 deadly sins were based on. You know, the wrath of something that comes from the envy of someone else. You try to smile at your friend who's in acting class who's kind of your type. It's like, oh yeah, I just booked 3 nationals. And you're like, oh, I'm so happy for you. You just want to stab them in the throat. So that's all sort of a real process for us as human beings. And what it ultimately does, Clay, which is what the Actors Network and I have always been about, is it shuts us down. And I'm not talking about craft. I'm talking about business. You are a walking billboard for what you're selling. everybody is a walking billboard, yet nobody knows you exist because we wind up shutting down. We have a fear of rejection, or we think we're being rejected. And so then we just stay home and become a self-fulfilling prophecy for nothing's ever going to happen. And that's all very human. And so are the 7 sins.
So give us a little insight into a solution for one of the 7 deadly sins.
Well, one of my solutions, I'm almost positive that it falls underneath sloth, is the actor pie, which is something that I probably invented 21 years ago. And it's not something that business people haven't done for years, but I did it in a certain way. I actually do it I do it for the LA Conservatory at AFI. And it's a different way of looking how you break down your time. And I basically did it off the concept of a pizza pie, whereas 7 slices of the pizza cut the normal way, 8 pieces, and 1 slice is left over for you as an actor, because we all have to live life, get married, have kids, have jobs, people live, people die, but life happens. It's not stopping. And so when I force people to break down in my presence how they spend their time, it becomes very clarifying for people that they don't actually leave any time to pursue the business of their career. They leave time for the craft. But if you're a product, I don't care how fabulous you are, if no one ever knows you're on a shelf someplace to be purchased, you ain't gonna be bought and sold. So that's, actor pie would be a solution to actor sloth. That would be one of the solutions of the 5 that I have in the book, would be the techniques that I spent years developing as the founder and president of the Actors Network.
Okay, awesome. Now, you've been bringing up the Actors Network, but I'm sure a lot of people are not familiar with TAN, the acronym TAN. It's how I originally met you back in the 90s, was through TAN. So just kind of give us a little insight in how that was helping actors and how it could still help actors.
Well, yeah, I mean, the sad part for me, Clay, is that I closed the physical studio of the Actors Network 6 years ago on June 30th, 2013 for several different reasons. But the Actors Network in 1991, I'll say just a couple quick things. Number one, it was the first and still is the only organization ever of its kind. It was the most endorsed actors business organization in the history of Hollywood across both coasts. It was a business information education membership organization. We were not, and you know this, we were not a casting workshop place. We had basically 4 pillars that the place was predicated on. One of them was topical discussions that I did. One of them were what we called power groups, which were the monthly strategy meetings. And if there are people who are watching who are younger, or maybe even sitting in this room, who go, oh yeah, so-and-so has that now, and oh yeah, so-and-so has that now, yeah. One of my former lifetime members, Dennis Baker, has basically tried to bring a mini version of the Actors Network into the SAG Foundation. Then we also had special guests and we had industry guests. So I had industry guests who would come speak for an hour, casting, agents, managers, writers.
I've come in.
Direct, absolutely. Because you were a special guest. I created the special guest, which was the 4th pillar, because those special guests were people who did something for money. They did a service to actors in the community. And what I wanted was you'd get, your friends you'd be in line at Starbucks and a friend, oh, I got a great photographer, but you don't know him, you never met him. And I'm a big advocate as a psychology guy on the sense that somebody gets from you when you were to come. This is just like the Actors Network right here, this studio. You're standing up there and there's people in the room. But now they get to meet Clay Banks in person. They have a sense, the way he talks, tone of voice, what his essence is, what his vibe is. That's not the same as some ad on Facebook.
Sure.
And so I was a big in-person, get your hands in the dirt of your career. That's why one of my solutions is campus orientation. Actors come to LA and they never spend time learning the city. It's just do it when they have to. Yeah, well, it's a great idea when you have no idea what traffic's like, you're not really paying attention, you don't know where you're going. You have GPS, but you still get there, and you're late, and you have to rush in, and they're ready for you to audition.
And they close the road on you without you even knowing about
That is correct. I mean, it happens. And so all of those things are part of if you're going to choose to be a professional. And so that's what the network was, and it had several other elements to it, but those were the 4 main: special, industry guests, topical discussions, power groups, and the thing I'm probably proudest about, aside from the people who are, technically celebrities who were members, from Masioka to Maggie Grace to Christopher Gorham to people like that, are also all the people to this day who are still working regularly. Elaine Lowe just became I believe, a writer in some way for HBO, if I'm saying this right. She just finished her series Doxed. I mean, Amir Talai. There are hundreds of us, tan people, that are still heavily working in this profession, and you know, I'm proud of that.
You did a bang-up job with that, and I know I remember us having talks towards the end when you were having to make that really kind of stressful decision.
Yeah.
I understand that. I'm very compassionate about that. What would you encourage actors to do now to be able to receive similar type of support?
Well, I want to be really clear about this answer. I've never been a particularly good salesman for stuff that I did. Sell anything else. I don't spend time usually recommending entities. I mean, I did 100 videos, which are on the Actors Network website.
Is the site still up?
Yeah, oh yeah, actors-network.com, and you'll find. I mean, it's really cheap. I mean, I even have a $10 monthly fee, but I did 25 hours of content. I did 100 15-minute webinars of me talking about these particular scenarios. So I cover a bunch of stuff there. There are, I don't want to dismiss, there are some decent people in the city who kind of do know what they were talking about, who claim to be business educators or business advocates, but I don't have a running list of who I'd recommend to that. I mean, I do know a few people who do have some knowledge and do still work with actors in that way, but I mean, I still do private consults all the time. I mean, I've been doing probably consulted 1,000 actors privately, and 5,000 people came through the Actors Network. So I still do that. I'm still available for it. But for me, it's not. Here's my problem with people who talk about the business or educate on the business. They'll say you need this and you need that and you need this. You need a demo reel. But they won't explain the depth of why your demo reel should be the way it should be based on your current product and type. And that kind of goes to Mr. Cut with the watch and the commercial. So when you looked at him with the watch and the commercial and the thing, and this guy, well, that's what I did for 23 years. I actually broke down every single thing that this piece of the business was about. And that's the depth with which I wrote the book. It's the depth with which I went and did things and was successful at it. And I think a little more of what you get out there isn't necessarily wrong. It's just really thin. It's really thin. It's a chapter in my book. Most of what people call the business of show business, I call the setup. Yeah, you got to get here. You got to get moved. You got to get settled. You got to get a job. You got to get some pictures. You got to have a demo reel and maybe shoot some footage. That's just the setup. I used to make a joke. It's like snow skiing. It's like you can go out and buy an outfit and you can go rent or buy some skis and stuff, but it doesn't mean you know how to ski. Because when you get to the top of the chairlift and you still fall off the chairlift and you slow everybody down, we don't like that. So there's a difference in setting yourself up to look like you know something and then actually knowing it. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but if there's 25 real steps to something, and most people out there are really just discussing 5 of those 25. And I always went past that.
So it's thorough training for the art of the craft as well as the business of the business.
Left side,
Yeah.
Because I want that to not be something that stops you. I mean, come on, Clay, you've lived in LA for a long time. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you sat around and did a survey and interviewed 1,000 actors between the age of 22 who came here when they were 18 to people who were 52 or 62 who've been here since they were 22, and you asked them, aside from not becoming what you wanted to or not work, what slowed you down? Do you really think the answer would be because I couldn't find a good headshot photographer? No. What slows us down is us. Depression. Why try? It's rigged system. They're all human reasons. I had a girlfriend and the thing and the blah happened. And what happens to us, yes, is because, and this is a video that I did, is that you treat something in the hardest city Olympics of the world for acting business, Los Angeles, California, and you basically give it hobby time and you want professional results. Yeah, life doesn't work that way.
I think a lot of people that study with me are thinking, This is exactly what Coach is saying all the time. I mean, the information is solid. It's there. Our last guest, Joe Abraham, he came on as a working industry professional who did 6 years professionally on Broadway and transferred into on camera. And we were sitting here having a similar conversation. Why don't people get this? We get it. Why don't people get this? You know, it's like for guys like us, we understand these success principles. But so many people, it's like foreign. And they're trying to make it in a highly competitive industry.
Yeah, but there's no entry barrier.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't win an Olympic gold medal because you'd like to. That's why the Olympics does the stories of, you know, the dude works 60 hours a week at Home Depot and the rest of his life is, you know, running around a skating rink. You know, that's why there's no entry barrier. Anybody can call themselves. Don't you remember back in the 90s when it was really popular to call yourself a producer? I used to make a joke. They used to do business cards at Ralph's.
Do you remember Dove's?
Yes.
Remember that class?
Yes.
Teaching you 2 days to be a producer in 2 days?
Yeah, I mean, I just, you know,
Dove
again.
Sims, or was it?
Yeah, and then you'd be at a party and, well, I'm a producer. I've, you know, several projects in various stages.
Various stages of development.
See, which means absolutely nothing. Well, that's just as thin as saying, I'm an actor. Really, who took your pictures? Oh, my friend Billy, you know, with his camera behind the back, but next to the doghouse and the goat and the balloons. You know, again, it's just a profession that allows, and I'm not even saying that in a snarky way. It's just simply a profession that does not have an entry barrier. And just because you went to some university, I mean, come on, man. Mm-hmm. How many people have I auditioned against who went to some school? Yeah. But that's why I brought up the stuff about what happens in the audition room. It's like, man, you may have a degree from that school, but if you clear this door and this whole setup right here throws you off, I guarantee you your audition is not going to be as strong as mine. That doesn't mean I'm going to get hired. They may go Asian female.
Sure,
I'm just saying. But, you know, I used to have this conversation, like, I'm not showing up to network and have a chit-chat when it comes to a job interview. I'm showing up to get paid. Mm-hmm. And I don't book them all. But people always ask about feedback in theatrical. You know what your feedback is? If you don't get hired, does the office call you back in again? Mm-hmm. That's your feedback. Mm-hmm. Well, I've now booked 5 shows that I've read for 5 or 6 times, and I'm not a hard type to find. I'm as normal of a white dude in this city as you can find. All the guys in my category have long resumes. I'm easy to not call in. So it's just, to me, it's just that we don't have an entry barrier. There's nothing stopping us from trying, from dipping our toes in, being on the game board a little bit, whatever. And then when, you know, the first rat trap smacks you in the foot and you're like, and you get hurt by something out in Hollywood and you didn't get a job or whatever, it's not a hard profession to just exist. I called it breathing with a headshot. Breathing with a headshot and the mentality of it being a hobby. And it's not against anyone, it's just the difference of how are you even going to make it into the 3%? Skip the 1% and the 0.5% of celebrities, but 97% of our union, for the most part, doesn't work in a principal way. Mm-hmm. I'm not dismissing background. I'm just saying the money made by background is not the conversation we're typically having. So that's 97%. So
the statistics is when, you know, I work over at SAG as well, and the statistics there, and you can correct me or update me, is right now there's presently roughly about 160,000 card-carrying members worldwide in the union SAG-AFTRA, 160,000. And the statistics are, and they line up with what you said, is that less than 3% make over $5,000 a year in calculated earnings, which is about 4,500 actors are making over $5,000 a year in the union out of 160,000. That's correct.
Yeah. If you want to discuss it, you break it down by insurance or go plan 1, plan 2, then you start getting into really small numbers.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I was always careful of, Clay, and I talked to a lot of people about this when the network began to grow, and then we had this big 2-page spread in Backstage West in 1998. I used to say, look, I'm not trying to mess with your dream. I have no right. I don't have a dog in the fight of your career. Only you do. Mm-hmm. I'm just simply sharing with you that within 6 months or a couple of years in LA, if somehow the lottery ticket hasn't landed on your head, or you're not related to someone and a blah and a thing and a whoop-de-doo and a hoo-hoo-dilly, and now you're on a show and all things are good, if that doesn't happen, and yay for you if it does, what are you going to do? And so this organization and my mentality in this book, and as I speak today, is still predicated on, what are you going to do? And it's up to them to decide, yes, I'd like to do that. And I still don't see most of our community. I understand we want to just be plucked out of an acting class for our work and be put on something and have that continue. I completely understand that formula and that model. I completely get it.
The Rami Malek effect. He was over there on Beverly Boulevard taking classes, and then boom, on a TV show, boom, now he's rocking and rolling. It does happen.
It does.
It
Absolutely.
does happen.
100%.
But that's the exception. That's not the rule.
Right.
So let's do this. We're coming down the back 9 on this interview.
Ooh. How am I 2 over? How am I doing?
No, we've got about another 10 minutes. We've got a question that's, I think, some questions that have come in, so we want to handle them. But before we get to the questions, and we'll get to your questions in just a second, we've talked about a lot of the realities, and I do. I kind of have to give them the shock effect as well. Look, these are the realities. This is recorded earnings over at the union. These are realities.
Sure.
What do we do to counter it? What are the positive things that we can tell the audience to keep them supported and encouraged and going in the right direction?
Walk in the park. That's an easy answer for me. You want to think back to the late 80s? Just picture me with a lot of hair like flock of seagulls and parachute pants and some bad shoes.
It's an interesting
don't hold
right
on
there.
to that visual. You're never going to see that headshot, but it was funny. I go back to that day. I go back to those years, and how difficult was it to try and create a tool that could actually change your career? I mean, you had to hire 27 people in a truck and a thing and a hoo-hoo dilly. And now, if you would go about it in the right way, you can literally create, and everyone goes to the place of shooting a film or a short film. You don't have to shoot a short film. You can just shoot a 2.5-minute scene and really do it well and change your career. Mm-hmm. People can't run away from talent. But again, everybody, they get their friend Billy to write it, and the people that are not very good, we're just not good with filtering what's going to make this awesome for me. But that's the number one thing that I would say, Clay, because I do it all the time. If I moved to Los Angeles today and I was 24 years old again, that is all I would spend my first 9 months on, is getting 2 or 3 minutes. And notice what I said, because what most people do is they'll spend 6 hours to do it. They'll spend 6 days. No, I would have spent 6 to 9 months getting it done, because everything takes 10 times longer than you think it's going to.
You're saying you're getting a reel together, getting a performance
I'm just getting footage.
together.
Yeah, I'm just getting footage as a tool. And then...
being good enough to make good footage.
Well, being smart enough to know how to get good footage made of you is how I would say it.
But you also have to be talented and be able to,
Correct.
to
Correct.
be trained.
And then the other part of it that everyone always says is, well, I have my stuff up on YouTube. Okay, well, I don't need to go into the metrics of how much video gets uploaded to YouTube every minute of every day, but it's astronomical. And so that kind of goes back to my point. It's like, why would somebody take the time to watch something of you at 22 or 23 years old? You want to know why? Because they met you someplace and you had a really brief 90-second conversation with them and you were cool. We're always trying to hit a home run every single time we step out of our house and every single time we meet somebody. And I have an analogy to that in the dating world, which I will not do on your show. But yeah, you're not necessarily going to go home with somebody every night. Sometimes you actually have to work this out over the course of time.
Yeah, that might be a good idea.
But the people who get people to watch their stuff are people that they've made an effort to let them know, hey, I'm serious about this. But that's the thing to me that's so positive about today's Hollywood, is you have so many vehicles, from the new media agreement to being able to self-produce those things to all the modified agreements. You have so many, yes, you have a lot of craziness and a lot of mess and a lot of diversity and all of that. But you have a lot of options to be able to create something to cause a decent representative to go, I don't even care about all the demographics and all the truth of the business and all this BS. I just need that person right there. Have to have them.
Yeah.
And so that's much easier than it was back in the day.
Excellent. Let's do this. We've got a couple of questions, and then I have a question, and that's pretty much going to take us to
Fast
the hour.
answers. I'll go fast.
So we have a question.
That is right.
It's not my fault.
Make it? Okay, so we have a question. Well, I have a question personally. So I've been hearing you talking about auditioning multiple times for the same casting director, like you did for Hawaii and Lost, where you did multiple auditions. Do you change anything when you go in for the same casting director, or since you go in, multiple times, do you change
Well,
anything?
the roles are different. So,
Right.
so when you say change, you mean besides the actual material?
Besides the material, do you
Oh,
mean like?
No.
No. Okay.
No. This is also one of our challenges is that it's a very fine line between being friendly, but not throwing yourself off by being too friendly, because chatting too much is not really the way you want to go. And with most offices, you get that vibe off the first time that you walk in. This is not, and most of them are not chit-chatty. Hi, welcome, thanks. I mean, I was walking, they usually say, do you have any questions? Please don't ask a question if you don't really have one.
Exactly.
It's just the only thing it's going to do is throw you off. And so I'm always friendly, and I always finish every audition with thanks for taking the time to have me in, because they don't have to have me in,
Right.
even after all these years. But no, as far as your base demeanor behavior, no. Simple, calm, quiet, professional, show up on time, sign in, walk in, do your job, go home.
Right. I call it be bright, be brief, be gone.
Yes. Even when you're working.
You're right.
Hawaii.
Yeah, of course.
Be bright, be brief, do your job. Action. Great, thanks. Okay.
Don't show up with a hula skirt and
Yeah.
a lei from the night before.
Or hungover, yeah. It's like,
Yeah,
no.
not a good
Walk in, do
idea.
your job. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
right?
job.
All right. Do we have any other questions that are going on there? Okay, great. So here's what I would like to do.
Ooh.
I got a question for you, Kevin. Okay. So for the audience, big social media time, obviously. You've got an Instagram account.
I do.
And you now are going to be able to send out one Instagram message and a picture that will actually be seen by everyone in the world on Instagram. What's your message to the world, and what's your image?
Wow, you planned that question. That's the CBSI question. The image would probably be, I would probably splice it. I'd probably cut in a picture with my old dog. It would be a picture of me, for certainly smiling, probably with a baseball hat on, and my message to the world would probably be, if you're going to do something and do it seriously, make sure you really love doing it, whatever it is. And the second you realize you don't, please do the world a favor and do something else.
There you go. Follow your passion is what I'm hearing.
And it's a lot of what happens in this business, but I still apply it to everything else, because that was the Actors Network. When I finally lost the true joy for doing it, I was like, okay, it's time to close
Time to
this.
move on. Good for you. You know, like Kenny Rogers says, you got to know when to hold and when to fold and when to walk and when to run.
And I'm a card player.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so just before we peace out of this episode, is there anything else you'd like to share that you'd like people to know about you or what you're doing?
Well, I mean, I'm these obviously, but ironically, I did write this silly gift book.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That thing. No, it's okay. It's just
let's talk about this here.
No. It's
Yeah?
it's just a gift book called Life in a Word, because the holidays are coming up, and I have the first companion book coming out in the 1st of October, called Politics in a Word.
Okay, 60 seconds. Life in a word. What are they?
It's a
expect
play.
to find in
It's a
here?
play on the definition of a word. So you would open it up. You'd see the Webster's definition on the left. You'd see the word at the top.
Yeah.
But the story you're going to read is not what you expect that word to be.
Oh, it's this fun little book.
Yep. And
Right.
the other thing I would
Life in a
say,
word.
so I'll do one that's personal and one that's professional. The other thing I would say, which is also a chapter in my book, is this. This is a crazy profession, and it is art. It may be the business of art, but it's art. And I would probably tell you 50 to 70% of the pain that I have seen actors experience in Hollywood is because they came here for some reason in a fully subjective profession, and they think that there's somehow an answer to their success. And as I used to say to people all the time, I was like, look, I've had 46 representatives in my career. I've done 50-some TV shows. If there was a formula and an answer to being a star, I assure you, my butt would have found it somewhere since back then.
Right.
So you just have to do things from the core of what you're doing, why you're doing, and stop looking for the perfect teacher, the perfect headshot photographer, even though I know you're the perfect teacher. Stop looking for the answer like math and science in something that isn't.
Awesome. I don't know about being the perfect teacher, but I try hard to be good. KevinEWest, it's been a pleasure, my friend.
Always, man.
Such a good interview. Thanks so much. Guys, this has been the Performance Zone. I just finished up the interview with KevinEWest. Kevin, your website, where if you want to send them anywhere?
Sure. I would send them two places. Well, actors-network.com is the Actors Network. You can just put the Actors Network in Google.
Okay.
All my social media is at the Kevin E. But also the Actors Network has a closed Facebook page. So when you put the Actors Network in Facebook, two pages will come up. One's a page and one is a group. By all means, please request to be a part of that closed group, because that is my way of sort of continuing the conversation related to the business and related to what you're dealing with.
Awesome.
Worldwide.
Beautiful, Kevin. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, brother.
Thank
I
you
appreciate
again.
it, man.
The Performance Zone, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode.